So for my testimony, I really feel compelled to start with lifting up the name of Frankie Duquette. On January 29th, 2021, Frankie Duquette was killed while he was serving my city as an MTA mobility driver. I want to offer condolences to his family, to his friends, to his work partners. I want to affirm in his name that what is remembered lives. And we will remember your sacrifice, Frankie. One of the odd things about living in Baltimore is one doesn't always use the word reliable and the acronym MTA in the same sentence. The MTA is a state-administered transit system that works just fine for some people. But the bus system in Baltimore City and Baltimore County is not one of those places where it works just fine. I have lost count of how many times I have waited at a stop for the bus, and the bus has driven past me in spite of the fact that I am waving my arms and hollering at the top of my lungs, hello, the bus, hello, the bus. Now, I understand that's because I'm just a little over a meter tall because I'm sitting down in my wheelchair. I can also not remember to recount how many times the bus has pulled up and said, my lift is broken, I can't help you, and then driven off. I can't tell you how many times I have looked at my program on my phone, which tells me when the bus is coming, where at one moment it says the bus will be there in 5 minutes at my stop. And then when I look again, after about 10 minutes, it says the bus will be there 25, 30, 35 minutes. Now, that's not so bad in the summertime when it's bright and clear, but in the rain, in the winter cold, it is not acceptable. It's really not acceptable at any time, but I can be patient when the weather is fine. In the cold of winter, in the rain, no, I lose my patience. Now, Baltimore had this fancy new system implemented a few years ago, and it looked great on paper, pretty colors, lovely lines. We even got an award for this plan for our transit. But like all plans, or at least my friends in the military say, the first casualty of the battle is the battle plan. The first casualty of the transit system is the transit plan. It's not working for the city. It's not working to alleviate poverty. It's not working to alleviate racial concentration. It's not working to serve people who are otherly abled, disabled, differently abled, like me. It's very funny when I think of my relationship to transit in my city. I actually will call myself a word that I haven't used in any other context for a long time. And that is, I think of myself as a cripple, crippled by transit. I can't go where I need to go. There are places I go where I help feed the hungry, that sometimes I get there, sometimes I don't, because transit is that dysfunctional in my city. I wish I could say happy, positive, hopeful, kind things about my city's transit. But the one thing I can say is there is now a movement, maybe even a passion for the idea of a regional transit authority that takes our transit out of the hands of a neglectful and somewhat disrespectful state agency and puts it in a place of accountability and control, accountability to the region and in control of the people of the region. Maybe that's the hopeful thing I can say, is this has emerged now. And I hope we do achieve a regional transit authority, a transit system that is accountable to people who ride it, that is controlled by people who ride it, and that is respected by the people who ride it, and in turn offers respect to those who need it. Now, that's my statement. I am open for questions. And I, again, am sorry that I didn't have a lot of happy things to say.
Well, this is Rita, and I just want to share with you, I can relate with a lot of what you said because my husband is blind. And so when he waits for the bus, 'cause like I said, we don't always have access to a car. He tells me he can hear, when the bus is coming, because that's how he's trained. Your other senses pick up. And often, not often, let me take that back, not often, but it has been a number of times when the bus driver forgot to tell him this was his stop and he had missed his stop. So my heart goes out to you and so many of the other disabled. A lot of people don't understand those issues. So I thank you for your testimony and I honor you for that. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Caro, do you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, I mean, thank you so much for sharing that, Laurel. I think that I'm only a relatively new Baltimore resident, and I have honestly interfaced with the transit system one singular time. And so, even just hearing your experience and knowing how critical it is to fight for a regional transit authority, to fight for the people of Baltimore to actually have a control and a stake in their own transit system, knowing the kind of impact that that can have on riders like you and the riders that you mentioned, right? Those who are coming from poverty-stricken neighborhoods, those who are suffering the most at the hands of racial inequity, those who are disabled and forced to adopt. I mean, the thing that really like moved me to tears was when you talked about being forced to adopt a label that you don't see yourself as, but that the, insufficient and unreliable transit system has forced you to adopt. And I guess my question for you would just be like, on the long list of things that need to be better about the MTA and about transit in Baltimore, is there sort of like a short list of what you think needs to happen first, right? Is the transit authority the first thing? Is it having more buses? Is it establishing a red line? Like, is there, something that you feel like is the number one priority?
Well, when you talk about the red line was 10 years of my life's work. I lived in Edmonton Village, and my community association devoted itself to fighting for the red line and celebrated when it was shovel ready. And when our governor scrapped it, it was heartbreaking. The red line was a passion of my whole neighborhood, and we worked so hard. And in the end, it was the old biblical sense, the taste of dust and ashes. But what I think the Regional Transit Authority needs to do first is work on training the drivers to look out and to look down, because I'm down. There are tall people waiting up at the bus. They look out, they see them. They also need to look down to see if there are children or disabled people waiting for the bus. But simply sticking to the schedule. I have a dear friend who has to leave her house an hour and a half early just so that she can get a bus ride 15 minutes to where she works and be on time to work. And still, once or twice a month, she ends up taking a taxi, a lift, so that she can get to work on time. Focusing on reliability, on the schedule, even if the bus comes every half an hour. If I know the bus will reliably be there, I can plan my life more easily than I do right now. as I said, you look at my program on my phone and it says the bus will be there in 5 minutes. I'm at the stop and all of a sudden the bus will be there in 35 minutes. They drop buses off the line. They're not reliable. What the Regional Transit Authority has to do is be reliable and keep to the schedule so that people can plan their lives, so that people can get to work on time, so that people know how much time they need to ask of the sitters watching the children when they're out on errands. It's just the first and most important thing after training the drivers to see everyone.